All right, Fern. Yesterday afternoon, of course, we're recording this on Tuesday. It'll be up later in the week, but on Monday, or maybe it was actually Sunday night, I
I'm
put up a
pretty
post.
impressed that you even know what day it is, to be very frank with you.
I mean, all days are the same for me,
What
at
what
least.
when was the last time you went out of your house?
No, I go for a walk every day.
You're while you are actually old by age, now you are a legitimate old Jewish man just walking
No,
around the neighborhood.
yeah, no, it's funny. Like at some point, my father and my stepmother, their activity, they bike a little, and my father plays golf, but they walk like 12 miles a day, like an obscene amount.
Damn, that's a
And
lot of
they're like,
walking.
yeah, they just go out. I mean, they have nothing to do, right? I mean, they've done this for a long time, but especially now. And sometime over the quarantine, I remember telling Roz, I was like, I'm my dad. I am officially my father. Because I do like, I probably do 5 to 10 miles every day.
Walking?
Yeah.
I mean, what does that take? A couple hours?
Yeah. I mean, I use the Whoop actually because it tracks my distance. Um,
That's got to take you at least, yeah, at least 3 hours.
Yeah, on some days, yeah. I mean, I'd go about 3 miles an hour. I mean, I'm not like doing it for exercise. I have a
No,
morning
I know,
call
but
at,
I mean, like if you were crushing a run and you were, trying to hold 8 minute miles for four,
yeah. Oh no, I've done a little less lately because the gym here reopened and I can leave the house and do some weight training again.
how's
But
that
we have,
been? Oh no, in your apartment or your whatever, your complex, whatever.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of silly. I mean, it's a small space. It's like the size of it's probably this living room here, if you can see.
Yeah.
And they have a limit of like 22 people. I'm like, if there's 22 people in this room, we are breathing.
22?
I was like,
That's
there's
bigger than
never
they
more.
allowed in most gyms in Virginia,
Well, there's never more than like two or three.
except
But
mine.
but it's funny because I'm like, this is silly. We've been closed for 3 months and now you're reopening it. But anyway, so I've been walking a little less. But one of our dogs, Lola, if she doesn't get a few walks a day, and she probably does double what I do because Roz takes her a couple times a day. Also, we
She's a
just take
fat
her to
bulldog, right?
no, that's the one that doesn't really do much of anything.
Oh,
But Lola is a Labradoodle, and she just she can go for days. So
yeah, yeah.
it's fun. I can take her off leash, and she just walks. So, but it's typically like every morning I have a Thunderbro call, or just I try to. It's when I listen to my books, so I try to be productive. But anyway, yes, I'm an old Jewish man. Where I was going with this was it was actually Sunday. Now that I think, I don't know if you saw, but I put up a post where I basically said, "Hey, if you're wearing a weight vest during your workout, it's because you don't want to go hard."
Yeah,
So,
everybody knows that.
and for the most part,
Except
I
the guy
got,
wearing the weight vest.
well, and I feel bad. One of my old clients from my old box, CrossFit Soulshine, great dude. His name's Jameson. He was the catalyst to it. He put up a picture, and it was a standard Metcon. It was like burpees and like thrusters or something. And he was wearing a weight vest. And I sent him a message. I was like, and I wasn't trying to call him out as a private message. I was like, dude, how about take the vest off and just go harder?
Yeah.
And I realized, especially during this quarantine, this has become a really terrible trend. I don't
I
like
mean,
when you just simply agree with me. It scares me. Like something's,
well, I don't know if it's a trend. I think people are just trying to find more things to do, right? Like I think people like don't a lot of them don't have access to a barbell. So like, okay, well, I can make this weightlifting because I'm gonna add some load to it. Um, and then if I was gonna just play devil's advocate, there's a lot of people who are trying to get prepped for Murph. That's legit. Even though like we all know that has already happened, it hasn't actually happened for a lot of gyms yet.
yeah. And again, and some of it was I had been seeing it prior to Murph, but I think I just wanted to really touch upon it. It's like there's a time and a place for a vest. Like if you want to develop better strict pull-ups, if you want to, like you said, wearing a vest basically turns any gymnastic movement into a weightlifting movement. You're now
Hmm.
moving, an additional external load. But I was just having this feeling of people are, I don't know if they're, this, I'm anxious to hear your opinion. Is it they're confused? Like this is harder because I'm wearing a vest, or do you think it's a sabotage? meaning they're like, I know for me, and this goes back to, we've talked about it in the past, but we can talk about it again. The old school way of doing this was, oh, Fran's 95, well, I'll go 135 and go RX plus. I'm like, that's way easier.
Well, yeah. Well, so I think there's two things there. One is the optics of it. It just looks harder, right? If I load the barbell up heavier, it looks harder. And while each rep might be harder, the overall workout isn't necessarily harder. It doesn't hurt as much. And then we have talked about this before. For some people, I feel like it's getting better, but there's just a fundamental misunderstanding of what intensity not only is by definition, but what intensity really looks and feels like. So Pat Sherwood had this thing years ago when he's always been this way, which is people fundamentally undervalue a light barbell. And when I say light barbell, some of you have a number in your head, and I'm telling you that when I say light, it is lighter than whatever the number is that you're thinking in your head.
Yeah,
So
and
I'm
it's
talking, it's a
almost definitely
75 pound,
less.
it's 75-pound barbell for dudes, right? That is, most people are like, that's a joke. That's a Randy weight for 75 snatches. So, and what he was saying is that weight for most people, for somebody who can manage, we're talking about somebody who is got a little seasoning on their CrossFit life, if you will. They've been around for a bit, right? 95 is something they can slap on the bar and they can go. There's a fundamental difference for when using a 75-pound barbell. That is largely, yes, there is a factor of, lactate threshold. That is mental. And his thing was, there is a very distinct difference between somebody who puts the bar down because they have to, because they physically are required to, and somebody who puts a bar down because they mentally have just given up and they don't want to do any more reps, right? And that is a lot of where, if you were looking for a visual, like that is like how I, in my mind, look at like intensity. Intensity takes me right up to that threshold where I don't mentally, psychologically want to deal with this anymore.
So you keep mentioning the word intensity, and that's, I think, when you become a part of seminar staff, because you're around these lectures and definitions for so long, certain words you really cling to. When I hear people use the word, like Roz will be like, oh man, it's hot out, it's intense. I'm like, nope, it's hot out. And I think
you have this inherent desire to correct people. Like,
well,
that's
just
not
with,
actually the definition of intensity.
yeah, it's like certain things, it's like, I'm sure other people have it in their careers, but it's a word that really means something in our career. And we spent a long time learning the definition. We spent a long time working on a lecture. So let's break it down.
Can you still say it? Put you on the
Intensity
spot
is,
here, bro.
all right, let's do it. Intensity is almost always the independent variable most commonly associated with the rate of return of favorable adaptation.
You put almost always in there. That's an old.
That, you know what? I've been called out by Chuck on that numerous times, but I'll give you a quick story. I took my first level one.
I just want to
October.
acknowledge that this is you justifying not getting it right.
No, I took my first level one October 2007, and then I retook it early 2008 because, and it was after I'd already done my level two. My girlfriend at the time was taking it in Maine. It was like Vallisboro, Maine.
Have you
And
talked to
Pat
her
Sher-
recently? Did you hit her up in COVID times?
I did. She booted me off her Netflix finally, which was a little disappointing.
I have so many jokes right now that I'm gonna hold off on because the times are tense.
I was on her Netflix for probably, we broke up in maybe 2012 or 13, so for almost 8 years. It was a good run while I had
You
it.
are so cheap, dude. That is.
So I
Oh
had to buy my
God.
first. There was a great thing I saw somewhere on the news where somebody was basically doing what I was, and we had talked. Like, don't get me wrong, it wasn't a friendly breakup, but it wasn't like a terrible breakup either. So clearly, she knew I
I
was on.
listen.
She knew I was on her Netflix.
I like how you're trying to justify using her Netflix because you guys had a conversation.
Yeah, yeah, she knew it.
I mean,
I
yeah,
don't.
she sent me a DM, and basically that means it's okay for me to steal your Netflix.
No, she was the kind of ex that like every year I'd reach out and say happy birthday. But anyway, I saw somebody was stealing the Netflix from their ex, and the way they got away with it. You know how you have like those images of like Fern, Jess,
Yeah.
Logan, you each have your own, and they made one that said settings, and
Oh,
whoever's
nice.
yeah, so the person was like, oh, that's just settings, and never checked it, and then finally realized somebody was mooching off their Netflix. So anyway, I do pay
That
for my
was,
own
I saw
Netflix.
somebody else did that where they made like a screensaver or something like that for a Zoom call, and it was just it said like no audio or something, like whatever comes up on the screen, or it had like just their name, and like that, so that's how they would just check out during Zoom calls, so they didn't have to actually physically be there. They would just turn it on, and it would just be like it would be, for those you guys can't see it, but it would be like this.
Yeah, perfect.
It would just leave.
that's that's what I would do if I had to be on too many. I do that sometimes on these podcasts. But so anyway, and now I pay for Netflix and I actually give it to my mom. So let's go back to the story. I'm in Vallisboro, Maine with my ex, and Todd Windman is giving the CrossFit lecture, beginning of day one. And he gets to the part on intensity, and he looks up. He's like, "Hey, does anybody know the definition of intensity?" I put my hand up and rattle off that definition, and him, Sherwood, and I think like EC, a couple other people like turn their heads like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" They didn't
You're
realize like
you're you're a participant.
I was a participant. I was just taking it again because I wanted to. Like
Yeah,
I took my level one maybe 3 or 4 times,
got it.
paid like, because every time back then it would come near me, one of my coaches would go and I would go again.
Yeah,
you know the way they used to do was it was 1,000, then it was like
get cheaper.
500,
Yeah,
yeah, and then so I was like, sure, it's worth 250. And it was, truthfully, back then it was changing so often that it was worth it. The workouts changed, the lectures
the lectures
changed.
would change. Yeah.
At that point, Pat Sherwood was the flow, so Coach Glassman wasn't there this time. It was interesting. So anyway, we talk about this. Let's explain to people, because there is that misconception of like, hey, I'm going heavier, or hey, I'm wearing a vest. This is more intense. So how do we?
Maybe.
Well, exactly.
It depends, right?
So let's go through it. We when we define intensity, like I said, and let's break that down. The independent variable simply meaning, hey, it's the one thing that you can manipulate. If you remember like 10th grade science, it's like an independent variable is something you can manipulate, most commonly associated with favorable adaptation. Let's simplify it. And favorable adaptation could be whatever it is you're looking for.
Hmm.
So for some people, and for most people, it's like, I want to look better naked. Well, intensity is how you get there. I
Hmm.
want to drop 20 pounds. I want to improve my blood pressure. I want to decrease my, HDL. All of those things are can be affected by your intensity. Now,
Now, what does that
how
mean is the question.
exactly? What would you say?
So, well, I like to use things that people already know and they can already reference. So we'll just start with the definition first, right? So we know that the actual, so essentially intensity is typically used as a correlate. People are like, oh, this is intense, and that, it doesn't have like much meaning. In CrossFit, it has actual meaning. And what it means is, when we say intensity, what we're talking to is your actual power output. So if we're if we're going to be using it like it's used in the engineering world and mathematics, what we're referring to is force times distance over time equals average power, which is equal to intensity. So intensity is equal to power, which is equal to your work divided by how long it takes. So force times distance equals work. So that's what we're referring to. And so knowing that, when I kind of talk to people about intensity, what I'll give them some things that they already understand. And I'll say, if you want to be stronger, we have to continually lift more weight. I have to progressively load the barbell in order to make you stronger, right? If you want to run faster, I have to run faster, which typically means I need to start with shorter distances and run at a faster pace. So I'm constantly, if I'm talking about managing intensity, I've got three variables I can manage. I can either increase the load or the force, right? I can increase the distance or potentially even shorten the distance, which then would affect time, or I can just do the thing faster, whatever that might be, right? So that's what I typically like to do it. Like, hey, if you want to run faster, you got to run faster. It's adjusting the time. If you want to be stronger, you got to lift more weight. Okay. And then the distance one kind of depends on whatever the modality is, right? So that one's a little bit more abstract, but people generally get it when I say that. It's like, hey, what do we have to do to that barbell if you wanna get stronger? Like, I gotta put more weight on. I'm like, that's intensity. That's how it works. And then the repercussions of that are the things that you are referring to, which is like, hey, I want to have better body composition. Well, that intensity generally leads to those things, right? Combined with, like, if we're talking about precision of nutrition and stuff like that. So that's how I would explain it.
Yeah, and like you said, it's force times distance over time. Force times distance is work. So, that's a misconception also. So for example, force times distance, let's say you're competing or moving with someone of equal height and equal weight, and they do the same workout as you. It doesn't matter the time. You've both accomplished the same amount of work. Now,
Mm-hmm.
the difference being you and I do Fran, you're doing more work than me. Barbell's 95, but you're moving the bar a further distance and you're doing a further distance on every pull-up. So you've actually done more work if we're getting
Technically, if we're going to split hairs about it, yes. Like, we have to factor in limb length and anthropometrics and all that stuff. But for most people, like, don't factor that in. It all comes out in the wash.
Yeah, and now let me be clear about my statement going back to that Instagram post. It's not never use a vest, because I don't think at this point in 2020 it's smart to say you need to be at your absolute max intensity every day.
Oh.
I think one thing we've learned over the years is going at it too hard too often can lead to overtraining or injury or just general fatigue. So throw a vest on and do it once in a while, but too many people are doing it as an excuse to go slower because it doesn't hurt as much.
It does. Well, it hurts in a different way. So
Yeah, not the bad way.
not
I
the
would
bad way.
say.
Not I went into the dark place and I can't, like, psychologically, I can't deal with it. Now, the other thing about trying to hammer intensity, and again, we could dive into a weird rabbit hole about how do I dial up intensity that people can't play around, and that's variance, right, in your programming. Like, there's certain things I just can't go full ham sandwich on, right? So you can play around with it that way. But the other thing about intensity is, if let's just say I'm not following programming that has good variance in there, then fundamentally you're going to lose intensity over time anyway. I mean, if we go back at CrossFit.com and they're doing a 3-on 1-off, 2-on 1-off, or 3-on 1-off, 3-on 1-off that they've been doing for, I don't know, almost 20 years at this point.
That's crazy when you stop and think about that.
It's
Wow.
bonkers, right? And that equation really hasn't changed because, and again, I think I've said this on the podcast, Thursday for most gyms is the least attended day.
Yeah, it's notoriously every gym's rest day.
Rest day.
Like
Like, where
international day
less
off.
people. Yeah, like, I've always joked to be like, hey, if you want crickets in your gym and to be in there by yourself, heavy day, just a heavy day on a Thursday, and it's just like ghost town. And that's because people can only sustain. And when we say people, we're talking about general population. I'm not talking about these games athletes who can hammer 5-6 days a week. I'm talking about the normal person in your gym, and I'm talking about even the fit people in your gym, right? The people who've been there 5-6 years. They can only lay the hammer down 3 days in a row before they are just beat. And that's Thursday usually. For most gyms, the highest attended day in the week is Monday. And then it goes off. And then Friday's a little good. Saturday, usually people come in like to throw down. But it's not random. It has nothing to do with people's schedule. It has to do with the physiological kind of, I don't want to say adaptation, but the physiological, like, devastation that's going on Monday through,
right?
that's going on Monday through Wednesday. And they're just like, hey, I need a down day. So now there's ways you can play around with that where you can dial up things that can't be done with extremely high intensity to allow people to spread that out. But that's why that happens. And so you can't get around intensity, and people who are chasing, making it harder are actually doing things that are, like, more detrimental to them getting the adaptation that they're looking for, right? If you want to be stronger, if you like, spend any time around in the powerlifting world or just read some stuff that Louis Simmons, that's why he would modulate the speed days versus the heavy days, because neurologically they can't handle 90% 3 days in a row, right? They're only going to squat heavy once a week, like heavy. When I'm talking about like world-class weight power lifters, you're not going to see them doing multiple days in the week, right? And I was fortunate enough to learn that in high school from a guy named Gary Frank, who was a world-class power lifter at the time. Like they would, all his lifters, my sister was one of them, they would only squat once a week because that's all the body could handle.
Yeah, and I mean, when physically for sure, but even mentally, I know when I was doing a starting strength program where I was squatting 2 or 3 times a week, mentally I was just like, I don't want to do that again.
Yeah, I mean, you can't ignore what's going on with the CNS with regard to like trying to recover from that. So yeah, people are doing it because it looks harder, and they're trying to put it under the umbrella of intensity, and that's not really what it is.
Yeah, and I don't want to also lead people to believe there's never a time and a place. The fittest in the world can throw a weight vest on any given Metcon and beat us, but they're the fittest in the world. And
For sure. Yeah.
I would say for a lot of people, like the example of my buddy, it's like I always used to tell people with going heavier, if you want to try to make this more, challenging, you need to earn it. Like for Fran, for example, you should not think about going heavier. You shouldn't think about doing it with a vest
Sub
until
3.
yeah, like get there. Then when you get there, you get to the point where it's like, now that becomes stressful. You don't want to do it every time. So now do it with 135, change it up. Do it with a vest, change it up.
Chest to bar.
Yeah, and it just becomes a slightly different workout, more so you're not stressed out every time you see the workout friend on the whiteboard.
It's gross. I still get, yeah, I don't want to do that. I know what the repercussions of that are going to be, like on my
Pain.
body. Yeah, I'm going to have like a full on meltdown after the
And
workout.
and I think for a lot of people, it's not even that you can't go. It's like there's a point in Fran, and hey, like you said earlier, if we look at the numbers, there's a chance you're actually getting more intense with the vest if you are willing to go there. But for a lot of people, they throw the vest on and it's like mentally they check it. I wouldn't say they check out, but they're like, cool, now I don't have to go as hard.
Yeah, I mean, you could do the math on it, but let's just say that, so the point, right? Like if I'm trying to do this correctly, would be to add load, whether it be weight, a weight vest, or load on the barbell, but only by reducing the time so much, right? So
Correct.
it does have value, but not so, but again, only if the value allows me to create more intensity within reason. So there is like, I'm not saying you could never do it and have less intensity, it wouldn't be valuable. But if I go from whatever, let's just say I can do whatever, anything under 3, Fran, and then I either change the load on the barbell, or maybe I make it chest to bar pull-ups, and then I make it 6 minutes, I think that was a miscalculation. But if I can do one of those, pick one, doesn't matter, and I can keep it within 60 seconds, the chest to bar is probably not going to be as much of an increase, but if I change the load on the barbell, I'm almost positive without doing the math that is going to be a significant increase in intensity.
Yeah, and for the record, the math would be, force being the weight on the barbell, distance being your center of mass or how far you're moving the barbell, and your time. You don't have to get super crazy about like, hey, the distance from, my chin to the bar and all that, but you can just start to play
Yeah, I
around with
mean, you
those
could say
numbers.
roughly 2 feet, or a foot, probably roughly a foot for the pull up, and then roughly barbell, we'll call it 3 to 4 feet, depending on the size of the athlete, is the distance that would move.
And
Right.
I would encourage people to try that, to check it out, to say, okay, mess around with Fran, try it at 75, try it at 95, try it at 135, just to see the difference. And again, time and a play. Hey, 135 and a chest to bar Fran is a great workout. It's just not Fran.
Exactly. Because that's not what it was intended before. This is when we go back to understanding stimulus. Fran is not a 15-minute workout. I mean, for a lot of people, it was, because they didn't know what they were doing. When you first started, like Todd was saying, he's like, I'm gonna go get some water now. I'm gonna do these sets, and then I'm gonna, So I think it's just a misunderstanding. And yes, some of it is optics. Be like, look at me, I'm doing something hard, which whatever. Again, if that's what you're looking for, then by all means do that. But don't fool yourself, and don't let your clients fool themselves into thinking that this is somehow going to make them faster. This is, so take Fran and do the weight vest. It's no different than this exact scenario. So I've trained plenty of people to try to go to buds, to try to do different special ops screeners, SEAL Team 6, all that stuff. And running is a big one, whether it's a 3 mile, a 4 mile, mile and a half, whatever, boots, pants, all that stuff. And a lot of the younger guys specifically will come in and I'll ask them a question about what is their running volume for a week, and some of them will give me on whatever, I'm making this up, but like let's say 3 or 4 times they're going for 8 to 10 miles run. Okay, so then my immediate question is roughly what pace are we running at? And I know it's got to be something around the 9 to 10 minute if you're putting in that kind of mileage. Right? None of these guys are like marathon runners. Well, in buds specifically, and we could even go less than that, the PRT, the SEAL screener, the PST, is a mile and a half. Well, it's actually a 500-meter swim. Then it's pull-ups. Then it's 2 minutes push-ups, sit-ups, and then it's a mile and a half run. Okay. Now, if you want to be even remotely competitive for a program like that, you need to run sub 9 mile and a half, which is not slow.
That's
Okay.
about my 1 mile time.
Yeah, probably. Just, I mean, it's not your fault. You just have short legs, you know.
It's hard.
So if you were to just reverse engineer that, you're like, well, listen, man, like we need to be running, you know, if we're going to run a 6-minute mile, you got to run 90-second 400-meter splits. And then you take any of these guys to the track and we start dialing these up in like track workouts and be like, all right, we're going to run 8 400-meter splits. We're going to go 1-to-1 work to rest ratio. And they can't hold that split even with rest. So then you have to educate them and say, listen, if you can't hold this split, which equals a 6-minute or 9-minute, right? If I'm going to do a mile and a half,
right.
If you can't do it with rest, then what the hell makes you think you're going to be able to do that after a 500-meter swim, after pull-ups, after push-ups and sit-ups? In your mouth, you got like cotton mouth, right? Because you can't breathe because you've been eating, you know, drinking chlorine water. And you think you're going to go run a 9-minute mile and a half after all of that with anxiety, and you can't do it right now with those splits? So then you have to put the light bulb on people, and they're like, oh, I need to run shorter distances way harder. And like, we're going to start with 200s and you need to hold 45 seconds for 10 repeats. When you can do that, then we'll bump the distance up and then we'll start playing around with the rest. But you're really kind of exposing people to what intensity is and how it works. Again, like going back to like intensity is an independent variable most commonly associated with maximizing the rate of return on favorable adaptation or the thing that I want to get, right? Like what, like the result. Well, if I want to run faster, the first thing I have to do is chop the distances down. And I have to be able to get the minimum time on that distance that it would take me to get the end result, right? So 6-minute mile, 4 90-second 400-meter splits consecutively. So if you can't run a 90-second 400-meter split, you can't run a 6-minute mile. Like it's just not in the cards. So then I have to do it faster than that. Right? I have to do it faster than that with some rest. And then I'm going to start pushing those together. Now I'm going to make, okay, now you got to do 800s at 3 or less, right? Like one of the most disgusting workouts is I think it's 10 800-meter runs.
Oof,
with like
5 miles.
10 of these bad boys with like, I can't remember, I have to go back and look at the rest. I think it's 3 to 5 minutes rest in between. If you can get all of those, but under 3 minutes, you are talking about somebody with a serious engine.
Well, and it's the same reason interval workouts are so hard. I mean, that's an interval workout, but no different than in the CrossFit world where it's like 5 rounds of XYZ, rest 2 minutes. And whenever I brief something like that at the whiteboard, I'm like, listen, this is going to suck 5 times, unlike your normal workout, because you're basically doing 5 individual workouts. Like in, most workouts when you give that final push at the end and your lungs burn, your heart rate's to the roof once. But on a workout like that with intervals, it's like it happens 5 different times. When I was first really working on Fran, it's kind of like back then it was like, I want to get a good Fran time. Something I did was I would break it up into 6 components and be like, I have to go 21 thrusters and I would rest. I have to go my 21 pull-ups unbroken and I would rest. And then eventually, I do 15 and 9. And then I got to the point where I said, okay, I'm going to do my 21 thrusters and pull-ups unbroken and rest, and that was
Yeah.
something Nicole Carroll spoke about too, where she said that's what she did to improve. And I kind of took it from there. And I don't recommend that, but you're basically doing the same thing. You're breaking up this big, longer workout into smaller components to go unbroken, to increase that intensity.
Well, it's also worth acknowledging these are also the people, typically the people that are throwing in the weight vest. We all kind of have somebody in mind, right? Like the so-and-so, whatever you want to name them, Bob or Susie. These are also the people that, if we're going to talk about some of the things that come up in the open, so if we talk about these increasing ladder workouts that have you have to basically earn the next 4 minutes of work.
Yeah.
These are the people that don't do well there, because that intensity piece is generally a pretty light barbell, and I've got to go deep into the pain cave. And that's because they're not exposed to that often enough. Now, we acknowledge, like, you can't do that every day because you wouldn't be able to sustain it, and then your intensity would continue to drop off. But if you never touch it, then you're also not prepared for it. So, and it again, like, if you're just acknowledging, like, oh, these are the people that really die off in that 4 minute window, we're going to increase it each time. And then they're 3 rounds in, they're like cashed out because they're used to putting the bar down, either physically or psychologically. They're just like, I just can't deal with this.
Those are the worst. I remember the first time it was basically a Fran, where it's like the 3 rounds of 15 and you would try to finish it, or the one where it was, I think it was overhead squats and chest to bar where it would go up by 2. Oh, those workouts. Those are some of the best ones that Castro, assuming he did it, ever
They're
programmed.
disgusting. They're disgusting. The Bergeron beep test is another one that's like that.
That's a great one,
like,
yeah.
how long can you like psychologically hold on to that?
And let's mention one thing before we get all feedback. Obviously, if you're training for your career, be it military, law enforcement, firefighter, throw a vest on. But that's where that misconception lies. Well, it's like, I gotta train with it. Yes, you should. But if you train at intensity, you're better prepared for whatever life throws at you. And if you throw that vest on, like we've discussed throughout this, you are most likely decreasing your intensity. So you have to find that balance of training with intensity, but then also training with, the
practicality.
apparel.
Practicality, right? There is absolutely a time and a place to throw load on the body and just walk, right? So if you're in the military and you're going to be, deployed to some super, turd part of the world, and your job now entails you wearing, 20 pounds would be a light kit, right?
Yeah.
40 to 50 pounds for hours on end, then you need to put a weight vest on. You need to have your body become adapted to that so that you don't get crushed in 1 hour into a 5-hour op that requires you to hump in and hump out. That's a real scenario, right? Where I think people blow this is like, I'm going to wear a weight vest for everything, including barbell movements, because we have to think about what the repercussions of that changes my silhouette.
Right.
Like, literally
Bar
meaning it
path.
changes my bar path, right? Now I'm ingraining really poor positions and really poor technique. So yes, throw a weight vest on, but largely I would say that, like, the second you could maybe get away with it with a barbell or a kettlebell or something like that, but a dumbbell or a kettlebell. But the second a barbell comes into the equation, you should not be doing that.
Yeah. I mean, you're changing the path of the clean, the snatch, and even a
Everything.
deadlift. So certainly, I just didn't want to not touch on that before we wrap this up. But the point is, Pat Sherwood, like you mentioned earlier, is one of the people I think about when we talk like this. He said the same thing about EMOMs. Like, if you're doing an EMOM, you're just trying to not work too hard. And I think it's true. And maybe the old adage of you need it every day is kind of obsolete. But 2 to 3 days a week of your training needs to probably 2, at that maximal intensity. The rest of the days you need to be going hard. But
well, again, like, hard is relative to the task at hand. You know what I mean?
Correct.
So, like, intense could be if I'm just doing I don't know, some gymnastics skills. If I'm doing slips, that can be intense in a whole different realm versus running versus a heavy barbell versus a 5 to 8 minute Metcon. Again, variance is a way that you can really start to limit the amount of intensity that somebody could dose themselves with on a daily basis. If I program it correctly, I simply don't allow people to just smash themselves. Like it's a built-in limiter, right?
Sorry, my dogs are going crazy today. There must be something going on outside. I'm sorry about this.
Don't go outside.
I'm very unprofessional.
It's dangerous out there.
They don't know that Corona is out there. So anyway, let's wrap that up. But I think I just wanted to make the point that, hey, what I was saying is, don't add weight, don't add a vest as an excuse to go easy. That's it.
Yeah, and I'll play devil's advocate. I also don't think as a gym owner, you need to go around scolding people who are wearing vests.
I agree.
Sometimes just let those people wear a vest.
That's a great
fine.
point. And you know, I wasn't putting it out there as a box owner. I guess I assume I'm always putting it out there as a coach because that's what I am. But you absolutely, I think box owners, if you're listening, let your members have the best hour of their day. And if that means they're going to throw a vest on and go a little slower, hey, it's better than the alternative of being like me and just going for 8-mile walks every day.
There needs to be, as a coach, and this is where you can have a little bit of empathy and you can practice a little situational awareness. If we're talking about an athlete or somebody who's legitimately trying to maximize their fitness, then we need to do a series of education about why this is dumb.
Right.
If I'm just got a plain Jane, plain Joe in my gym who comes in and decides that throwing on a vest is going to somehow improve their mental health because they just need to do it that way, help them put the damn vest on.
I like it, Fern.
You know what I mean?
Like it. Good way to end that. Help them put the vest on. So anyway, I think that was a great chat about intensity. That's really it. Anything to add about that?
No, I miss you. No, I don't really miss you.
How the box is doing well? Everything's open?
Crushing it, man. Life is good, you know? I mean, it's just a weird time. We don't need to go there, but it's just a weird time.
We're going to talk to Todd about working a level 1 this past weekend on the next episode. You know, he worked a level 1 and said it was a different feel. So I'm anxious to hear about that. But
yeah,
for
I
this
talked to
episode,
Cassidy about it too. He did one too.
Well, have him hop on if he wants. But for this episode, I think we did a great job. If you're listening and you have questions on intensity, if you don't like what we just said, if you have feedback, if you don't like it, direct it at Fern. If it was positive,
yeah, send it my way.
Shoot it over to me. All right, Fern, we're out.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to Best Hour of Their Day. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. How cool is that? There's a creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, so it becomes super simple. Some of these episodes with Fern or Todd or myself chatting with one another, we've done right within the app itself. Anchor will make it easy to distribute your podcast to all platforms, Spotify, Apple, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make an awesome podcast in one place. All you have to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Come on, who doesn't have Spotify at this point? And if you were unaware, Spotify now is offering podcasts. That's right. On Spotify, you can listen to all your favorite artists, but also podcasts in one place for free. Spotify has a huge catalog of podcasts on every topic, including the one you're listening to right now, Best Hour of Their Day. On Spotify, you can follow your favorite podcasts so you never miss an episode. Premium users can even download episodes to listen to offline wherever you are, something I always do before I hop on a plane. And you can even easily share what you're listening to with your friends. on Instagram and other social media platforms. Here's the deal. If you haven't done so already, be sure to download the Spotify app, search for Best Hour of Their Day on Spotify, or browse some other podcasts if you want. You can find them in your library tab. And also make sure to follow me so you never miss an episode of Best Hour of Their Day. Thanks again for listening to Best Hour of Their Day. If you haven't already, do us a favor, head over to the Apple Podcast app and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, feedback for either Fern or myself, hit us up, besthouroftheirday@gmail.com, or send us a DM over on Instagram at Best Hour of Their Day. Once again, we couldn't do this without the amazing community, and you are a part of it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting Best Hour of Their Day.